buildings on the routes it's thought he took from scene. And this is on page 2 of the Star this morning, maybe just to show you a bit what it's really talking about. This is a gentleman that was captured there. Sleuths say man was intercepted at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. And detectives were yesterday interrogating this man. They believe murdered the woman whose mutilated body was found in a dustbin in Nairobi. The suspect was reportedly intercepted at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport as he tried to flee the country. He was detained pending identification and interrogation, according to a police source there. It is too early to say if he is the man wanted over the murder or not. We have to wait, say the police officers. He was detained at the airport before a team of officers from Kasarani and DCI headquarters picked him for interrogations. The woman's dismembered limbs and arms were wrapped in with plastic sheeting and rolled in a bedsheet. It also emerged the man had called to book the room using a mobile number registered in a woman's name. He made the call from Ruaka. The owner of Airbnb referred him to an agent so he could view the room. He approached the agent at the entrance of the block of apartment and said he had been sent by a landlady to view the room and needed the key. And you can read the rest of the story there inside the Star as well. But also the government is moving in to make sure that security, and especially where we have patrons at the Airbnb, is more streamlined. IDs, identifications also are more scrutinized. So let's just run you about that particular story, then we shall look at that with our panelists. What does it really portend? Is it a ritualistic killing as well?
3 days after a body of a 20-year-old girl was found in dust bag in Roysambu, Kasarani, 3 suspects have so far been arrested. In connection with KTN News is reliably informed that one of the suspects was picked at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport on the way out. Though the investigating agency has not revealed the identity of the 3 suspects, they say it's too early to settle on them until forensic investigations are done. That puts the 3 at the scene of the crime. For now, they are persons of interest in the brutal murder of the young girl. Sources close to the investigations told KTN News that the family identified clothes of the deceased that were collected at the scene of crime. This is also subject to confirmation only after DCI forensic examination report is confirmed. The family has remained tight-lipped over the murder. 2 suspects that were arrested during the first day so far have been released. These were neighbors of the short-term rental house. Detectives are also in pursuit of a contact number that at the time of booking was traced at Ruaka 4 days before the killing and again traced to Ruaka 12 midday at the day of the murder. FIDA and other human rights organizations have come out to condemn the current trend of killings, terming them femicide.
It's not the responsibility of girls and women and young people to protect themselves. It is collectively as a society for us to have the role to appreciate that indeed we must have safety in our homes, in our communities, in our schools.
It is extremely saddening that in the last 1 year, 10 cases of femicide have been reported in the media. Many more cases remain unreported today.
When you have your friend, make sure that if they are going somewhere, maybe for a social event, if you're going together, if they are visiting someone, make sure that you check up on them.
So far, detectives are still investigating on the cause of the death. Ode Francis, KTN News, Nairobi.
Right, you're watching Global Today. We continue pace with our conversation here, all in court with Professor Peter Kedbanjo, who is the CEO of Africa Policy Institute. Also, we do have with us Dr. Hassan Kanenje, who is the director of Institute of Strategic Studies. Also, we have with us Dr. Ken Mbungi, who is a historian at the University of Nairobi, eagerly waiting to be joined as well by Yusuf Hassan, who is a member of Parliament of Kamkunji and also a member of the Delegation Committee on Foreign Relations and also Diplomacy at the National Assembly and Security. Right, I don't know, we can gravitate to this particular issue that now is raising eyebrows in the country with the macabre ritualistic killings. But you had sentiments to just wind up
maybe
the judiciary.
One more point to add to what I said earlier about the judiciary. The attempts that the Chief Justice is making, to have some kind of negotiation with the executive. Mm-hmm. The situation we have, Debal, is there is a sense in which a section of the Kenyan public lost trust and faith in the judiciary, especially on the way they handled things during the petition of the 2022 elections. And I remember that the Chief Justice and her team had an opportunity, to cement their influence and trust across the country. But I think at that point they lost it. Mm-hmm. If you remember, my colleagues will remember the kind of language the Chief Justice used in dismissing the petition. I'm not a lawyer, but you could feel a little bit uncomfortable. And it created a picture of, her being too close to one side of the two sides of the petition. I mean, I was trying to write the kind of phrases and words. Hot air, while chasing a wild goose, fool's errand, lost course, vain attempt, worthless pursuit. And of all the words, nonsense, I thought that really, now that the tide is turning against her, there could be some sections of the Kenyan public looking at it as poetic justice, as it were. So I think what the judiciary needs, other than the dialogue with the executive, is to find very quick ways to reinforce its trust and public confidence in what they do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Let's hear from Dr. Hassan Kanenja.
In 2003, the Ringera report had called for the radical surgery of the judiciary. And I think there was a lot of expectations among Kenyans that something was going to be done, about it. And initially, there appeared to be some efforts to right the wrongs that had been going on for many years. But of course, that was not to be. Now, with the new constitution, there's been a lot of hope. And despite some of the challenges, there was a lot of faith, and especially considering how the Supreme Court has been ruling in the last several years, sometimes against, the sitting government. And so that is something that attracted not only admiration locally, but also internationally. Looking at Kenya as a country that is finally maturing as a democracy, that, recognizes the principle of separation of powers. I think the challenge we've had increasingly, and especially in recent years, is the inability of the judiciary to deal with big cases. And that has been worrying. We do not remember the last time when, very troubling cases, people were actually prosecuted and sentenced. Now, of course, that's not just a function of the judiciary alone, because those who are going to bring the cases, the prosecution also has, they have a role to play. Now, the challenge for Kenyans, both in leadership as well as others, is we use the judiciary, our attitude to the judiciary is very convenient. We support it when we think it is in our favor, and we condemn it when we think it isn't. It's still the same monster that was there yesterday. And so it hasn't changed. So if you liked it, you may continue liking it today. That's not to excuse that, to make an excuse that the judiciary, does not have troubles. But I think for us, consistency is going to be important. Mm-hmm. Because for a while now, for instance, we were not exactly even discussing some of the pitfalls within the judiciary. Of course, until it became apparent that we're facing certain challenges from it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm still biased towards the principle of separation of powers, because in as much as they need to be dialogue, it should not be framed as a negotiation, because the negotiation is not something that can be done because the Constitution already negotiated the different roles. Neither can the judiciary, impose its will on the executive or the legislature. Everybody has a role to play within the separation of powers. And so as we go forward, I would perhaps encourage Kenyans to make less noise outside and to embrace quiet dialogue. Quiet dialogue in ways that does not, cause trouble, but also does not make Kenyans lose trust, both in the executive and in the judiciary, as well as in the legislature. Because today, these institutions, if they were to take a poll with regard to how much confidence Kenyans have on them, they're going to be shocked. Kenyans have a very low opinion of a lot of institutions that are ruling us today. And so perhaps we need to move towards talking quietly, as well as being very noisy. And frankly speaking, a lot of us who interact with lots of Kenya's friends outside Kenya, they're always shocked at how obsessed we are with petty things instead of actually confronting the bigger challenges that we face. So we need to grow up as a country.
We need to grow up as a country. Little that we should also be maybe broadening and standing on is the fact that we have the issue of the judiciary being a nose of wax, that you can twist it at your own convenience the way you want, just as we had with the opposition. When it was not really for them, they were twisting against it. Now that is against the executive, they're twisted, for their own benefit at the end of the day. But what should be finally the ultimate solution, the prime solution for this? You are calling for negotiation. Some of them are saying, no, don't go on the negotiating table. But we are in a stalemate. What does it call for when there is a stalemate between the executive and the judiciary? And going through the history of this country, I think this is the first time that we've had such a stalemate between the executive and the judiciary. Peter Kagwanja.
I think we are using the wrong language.
Yes.
Which is?
They'll never ever talk about negotiation when we are talking about governance and constitutional matters.
But you're the one who was actually...
No, I talked about dialogue.
Dialogue.
Yeah. There is a difference between negotiation and dialogue. These are two different worlds. Now, the dialogue of the three arms of government is necessary because you cannot check those that you don't know, and you cannot work on something that you don't know. Let me give you a quote about the bigger responsibility of the judiciary in a country, because judiciary is the one that is supposed to protect the interests of the citizens. The executive down the years has been a rogue, not in Kenya, but across the world. That's why we have had monarchs. That's why we have had dictators. That's why we have all the people, the pretenders to power. So nobody trusts the executive anywhere in the world. The legislature becomes a gang of thugs, sometimes taken over by mafia groups and discussing its own interest rather than the interest of the country or the nation or the kingdom. And therefore the two are actually the enemies of the citizen. In proper political science thinking, the executive and the legislature are the enemies of the citizen, or potential enemies of the citizen. They are supposed to serve the citizen, but often they don't. And this is what somebody said. Under our system of three branches of government, the courts ultimately are the checks on the legislative and executive branches when they exceed or even abuse the limits of their power, as they always do. They always exceed the limits. Now, when you use the word negotiation, you are talking about the court finding its way under the arms of the executive. We are going back to the 1980s and 1990s. So we cannot talk about negotiations. But when you talk about the court and the executive and the legislature having a dialogue, I don't see this thing about the executive and the legislature talking. That's nonsense. If we are talking about the government, we talk about this because there have been issues between judiciary and legislature. They're on record. They have been there. There have also been issues between the executive and the legislature. And that's why we have this debacle, because part of the legislature has opposition. And that's why, so we are talking about the executive versus the legislature. So if we want to have a national dialogue on anything, then we pinpoint the issue we are talking about. At this particular case, the executive is talking about corruption. In other words, it's waging a war against corruption. The executive can never wage a war against corruption because it is actually its members, current, past, and past, who are accused of corruption. So, in other words, it is for the branches that are appointed by the government, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the DCI, and others, to investigate and take the cases to court. True, our courts are corrupt to the hilt. There's no doubt about it. Nobody who lives in this republic doesn't know that. But the solution is not to demonize the courts and create saints out of the executive. It is not to demonize the courts and create a saint out of the legislature. Our country has that problem we are sharing. So if the president, for example, wants to get rid of corruption, he has no alternative other than to work with the courts. And working with the courts is to start by demonizing the courts. Start by demonizing those who are doing or dealing with those who are in the executive, who are corrupt. That's how the credibility will come through. But I think we need to have a serious discussion on this separation of powers, because it's something that's new to Kenya. We've not really understood it because we are used to, it's that chicken. You remember the chicken that was tied at home, spent the whole day in the market tied, and then was bought by somebody and then taken home, and somebody forgot to untie the chicken, and in the next morning when the chicken was untied, it continued to sit down because it was used to being tied. I think that's the problem we are having here in Kenya. We are not able to deal with this separation of powers. We want a strong executive. People are talking about, a benevolent despot. We are beginning to have a kind of nostalgia for the Moi era, dictatorship. I think the judiciary's role is to check the two branches of government.
Right. Let me open. Let me just open a member of Parliament, Yusuf Hassan, here also to just weigh in. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. The fact that we have maybe that statement, separation of powers, in itself, maybe it has a creation of silos within these three arms of government that we cannot see face to face. And even when you call for a dialogue, it seems that one of them is trying to maybe wash away the vigor, wash away the strength of the other, to water down or to soften maybe their stand as far as the separation of powers is concerned. The question will be again, what stops, and even if history bears down, have we ever had a place where the three arms of government will sit down together to just negotiate on matters, not necessarily when there's big issue like the difference that we have between the executive and the judiciary, for the smooth, seamless, flowing running of the three arms of government? Maybe that instance that we've said again that the separation of powers is preventing them to do this. But if you are to work together as the three arms of government, why can't we sit down and talk on a raft of issues?
But I think, Daban, the three branches do talk to each other all the time. They interact with each other. They are dependent on each other. One is dependent on the legislation from Parliament. The other one is dependent on the on budget appropriation.
That is a functional relation,
yeah,
which is expected at the end of the day. But if we always talk about a national dialogue, why can't we have just a dialogue where there's a conference?
But they don't need a dialogue because all the three branches, everyone is clearly aware of their roles and responsibilities, as is prescribed in the Constitution. The document that determines the functions of all these three branches is the Constitution. It's very clear that the judiciary has a particular role, the legislature has a particular role, and the executive has a particular role. The only problem is when one particular branch decides to dictate to the other one and to tell the other one what to do or not to do. That's when there is a problem. And in this particular case, that is the case. It is the executive that feels aggrieved by the actions of the judiciary and has been out in the streets preaching the weaknesses of the judiciary. And the weaknesses of the judiciary is corruption, just as many of these institutions have that particular problem. Mm-hmm. But the question I ask myself is that if the executive, which is responsible for the police, which is responsible for the public prosecutor, mm-hmm. is aware of judges who are corrupt, why don't they use the constitutional institutions that are in place to investigate those particular judges, mm-hmm. Rather than to wage a war against the judiciary? One of the issues that the executive has, and even with the legislature has with the judiciary, is there are some areas where the judiciary appears to be overstepping its responsibilities. And this is an area whereby every action of the executive and every legislation passed by the parliament is taken to court. And judges are willing to make a pronouncement on those issues that are purely legislative or political and executive. And I think some of that needs some clarification, because you cannot stop a government project that has been funded through a parliamentary process and is already ongoing, just because some builder or some person is unhappy with it. I think if you look at the Supreme Court of the United States or the courts of the United States, there are areas where they would not go. There are areas they would say, that is not within our competence. And in the case of Kenya, you have even judges who issue a summons or a ruling to stop you from being arrested by the police in advance. Mm-hmm. That seems to be not the right thing for the judiciary to be doing. The judiciary should wait until that person is arrested, taken to court, and make a decision whether the person is guilty or not. But to issue a ruling to say Yusuf cannot be arrested in advance, I mean, there is a warrant of arrest coming for Yusuf. That I find absurd. These are some of the little things that you can see. But in this particular case, the executive should not be allowed to abuse its power. The legislature should not be allowed to do the same, and the judiciary. There are three equal powers within the political governance structures that we have in our country. And I think the moment the three institutions become serious and respect their own roles and respect the roles of the other three, the better it is for us. Because whatever noise you make outside there, mm-hmm. Whatever criticism you make out there is meaningless, because the role and the responsibility of the judiciary is protected by the Constitution, mm-hmm. and the only way you can change it is through a constitutional amendment. And this is a very long process in which you would have to go through, and you would have to have a referendum. So in a way, our Constitution is perfect as it is at the moment, because it provides those necessary protections, and it has made it very difficult for an overreach from either the executive or from the legislator. And I think the judiciary is anchored in the right place. All it requires is leadership, and this leadership could also act very quickly. Instead of waiting to engage in a dialogue with the executive, the judiciary should go back into itself. It should say, we're hearing all these noises, we're hearing all these complaints and concerns. What is it that we can do within our own judiciary structure to bring the corrupt judges to court, to stop some of the overreach that we're seeing from certain magistrates and judges in certain parts of the country, and to make sure that in fact they protect their constitutional power and authority by being squeaky clean, by operating within the laws, and making sure that in fact they abide by the very constitutions that they are protecting. I think if I was the Chief Justice, I'd start my own process of investigation through the Judiciary Service Commission to find out whether some of these accusations have any merit and need to be acted upon.
Yeah, but we had from our statement that at least almost 71, of judicial officers also an investigation within the Judicial Service Commission. So that is something that she's on it.
They need to accelerate and make sure that, in fact, within the public eye, that they are not guilty of what they're being accused of.
All right. Let's sum up this particular discussion with you,
yes,
Dr. Kenneth.
I just wanted to indicate, those of us from academia, we have this tradition of throwing concepts around. The reason why Professor Kawanja and Hassan were strongly saying it's not negotiation, negotiation implies some kind of give and take. But then you are dealing with institutions that operate within the context of the principle of separation of powers. They have nothing to give and take because the rules, the processes which govern the judiciary are different as outlined in our constitution if you look at it vis-a-vis the executive and the legislature. That's why negotiation is a no-go zone. There's nothing to negotiate. CJ Koome knows her role and how she's supposed to operate. President Ruto knows his role and how he's supposed to operate. The speakers of our National Assembly and the Senate, they know their role and they know how they are supposed to operate. So negotiating means you give something from your end, there's nothing to give. That's why we are saying it is actually not negotiation, it is dialogue. Number two, Mheshimiwa seems to imply that what the president is doing will not necessarily have any major impact. Well, that is the ideal, Mheshimiwa. The president of a country, the most powerful man who controls such a levels of power, when he goes out there and says something about an institution, it means a lot to the public. So what we need to emphasize is that, yes, our judiciary might be riddled with corruption. Yes, our judiciary might be evil, but then it is a necessary evil. We needed them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Let's just finish up also with what we have in the dailies today, and just primed us on what is happening, especially with the reaction from the DCI and also the FIDA, and regarding to the femicide that is happening in the country. The cops now have nabbed as murder suspect with the hacksaw. Is under investigation, but it's raising question on this ritualistic sort of people are pointing towards the dismembering and man's inhumanity to man, the morbid, the macabre killing that was very barbaric right now, and the security of our women in this country. Let's just begin from there, and I'll want to pick the brains of also Yusuf Hassan on this, you being also a member of parliament. Is this raising an eyebrow?
Indeed, it's horrendous to be seeing some of this savage, mindless mutilation of women. And I think this is something that is quite new in some ways. I mean, murders have been taking place in Kenya. We are all like other human beings. But the kind of really brutal, cruel way of chopping a body and dismantling a human being. This thing is quite worrying, and it's a trend that seems to be happening in our country more often than I thought. I thought the last incident was really out of place. But I think we really seriously need to look at this, what the origins are, what the reasons are, the underlying problems that lead to this kind of reaction from people who must be mentally sick, in my judgment. And I think we should be able to investigate and to be able to provide some answers by seeking solutions that can protect both men and women in situations of this kind, because this is completely mind-boggling and unbelievable in many ways. And the quicker the Kenyan police and the Department of public prosecution begins to investigate and also educate, maybe do some civic education with our young women about the dangers that they face. Because as a father, I'm extremely worried, a father of several daughters, what this trend is going to lead to in terms of what is happening in our society, and mostly in our capital city.
Mm-hmm. And we raised the issue about encryption of messages, especially Facebook and the social media platforms, where it seems some of these conversations seems to emanate, you fall in love, or maybe you get in touch with someone and it leads up maybe for you guys meeting up, but there's no proper scrutiny on the person that you're actually conversing with. You don't know that particular person. So all of us, all our girls are very vulnerable, they're very gullible, and they're being taken advantage of. The government now is also taking stern measures as far as Airbnb is concerned. Do you think just giving your identification is enough? The IDs, because I know that was a bit flimsy, but now this is what they're actually fronting. What should be done to heighten the security, especially of this? Because we have to move us with what technology is affording us. But also, in tandem with this movement and the currency of technology, it should be also the heightened security around it.
I think we have a moral responsibility as scholars and opinion leaders in this country to dig deeper than just take what is going in the public as the debate. The debate we are having here is that of some criminals, men. We are even trying to give them some names, some serial killers, serial this, serial that. Something that's normally, widely quoted in the United States as mental cases, and so on. But sometimes when you have this killer instinct in yourself, and or you are revenging because your mother did this and this. They explain them with all psychological theories of why somebody would be looking for girls to kill, and so on. But I think we need to go deeper than that. Now, if you look at the Middle East, for example, I want to take you far. The Sinai Peninsula between Egypt and Israel, and that whole place is known for organ harvesting. The Eritreans, the Ethiopians, the Sudanese, trying to find their way into Europe and, the more prosperous part of the Europe and the Middle East, Turkey and so on. Now, so look for that literature and read it deeply, square through it, and you are going to find that the single reason there are so many murders and deaths around there is for this. And they're going for those because these are young people who can walk long distances, and therefore they are strong. The whole reason is organ harvesting. There's no other. Mm-hmm. I challenge you, and I've done this should be the third time I'm saying this, that there is absolutely nothing criminal about Shakahora. Somebody was in a mega business of organ extraction and organ selling. And I want somebody to come and say that I was wrong in that. I'm doing this as a scholar. It's a hypothesis. And I strongly believe that there cannot be a coincidence that you are looking for young hearts and livers. Mm-hmm. Because no old people are killed. Mm-hmm. In this case now of the bed and breakfast kind of places, we are talking about young girls who are helpless. First, they have no power to protect themselves against strong men. Therefore, they will do surgery on you the way they want because you have no power to resist them. And two, you're in a place where you delivered yourself, and so on. Now, the big question is, when you put it this way, then our girls are going to look at it differently. How? Because the current attraction is that you are so much into poverty, you're so much in need of some soft life, some kind of easy life where somebody provides for you, and so on. And what have you start to find that this is not a Kenyan problem. It is an international crime. And when you're talking about cross-border crimes or transnational crimes, this is it. We started off with human trafficking. And human trafficking was largely for prostitution and eventually slavery, quote unquote, if you go to where these people are headed. They do work for people at no pay outside there. After they leave the country, you don't know where they go. That's what we're calling human trafficking. Now, the urgent thing that science has not managed to bridge is the industrial production of a liver, industrial production of hearts and so on. And it's a big business. That's why people are going for young hearts and young livers. I want to be that controversial, because we need to go beyond the narrative in the public. Why young girls? And why, in these places? Why Shakahora? And why, the young African migrants through the Suez Canal into the Sinai Peninsula? So I wanted to put it that controversially, so that we think outside the box, as they say, or we even throw away the box and look at the reality as it is. It cannot be coincidence. And now, going by the headlines of the cops nabbing, criminals fleeing the country, it tells you that this is already transnationalized. These are not Kenyans going mental and beginning to kill young girls. It's a very, very well organized syndicate. The question is, where is our government when this is happening? Are we dealing with the criminals as we know them, or are we dealing with threat to our young people, both the girls and boys? That's my, look at it that way.
So we have a mental issue that also is being proffered here by Yusuf Hassan. Do you think this is organ harvesting?
It is transnational, because if you look at the people who are harvesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Hassan Kaneja.
Yes. One thing that comes to my mind is, number one, there are a number of areas where crime is taking place in this country, but the particular area we've been questioning is Roysambu. Roysambu has also been notoriously associated with foreigners. A good number of West Africans are doing wash and whatever type of drug trafficking is taking place, and it's very popular also with our young Kenyan girls, part because you have foreigners there who have money. Yes, and I think it's an area that actually the government needs to pay attention to, try and flush out a lot of that, because if they can get away with trafficking, then they can get away with murder. And there is sometimes a very careful calculation that if I undertake this measure, then the risks are still going to be low of me being captured. Second, has to do with, of course, Airbnb as well as other, accommodation, services that are offered. One thing that is important, the reason why there are fewer crimes in Uber than there were with taxis is because when the Uber comes, you actually know who is coming and the number, and that information is within the system. And so even the criminal Uber driver may be reluctant to actually commit a crime because they know, well, the phone to the phone call that was made probably is going to be associated with them, ultimately the system, and so they're going to be a lot more careful if they're actually planning to commit a crime, and that's part of the reason that you're actually having fewer crimes with Uber as opposed to taxis, and many people prefer to take Uber because you actually know who you are dealing with, at least in terms of the identity, and in case you disappear, they're going to be known. Now, for Airbnb, there has to be a responsibility for those people who are renting out the services to ensure the person actually living in the house is the same person who rented the place, that the identity is not exactly fake. Now, the challenge is sometimes the Airbnb people are not even anywhere close by, they live far. But there has to be within the system, because it works in other countries, to ensure that someone is going to make payments in a way that, the identity is going to be confirmed before they're given the keys, and stuff like that. And so perhaps that's the only area, but we cannot go start closing down Uber and stuff like, or rather Airbnb, because of, such crimes. We have a responsibility. But then there's another aspect. Now, poverty, Prof, is just one aspect. The truth is, majority of countries on the continent and in the global south, a good number of them, they're poorer than Kenya. Okay. But you may be surprised that their girls are not exactly doing the same thing or finding themselves in the same situation. One of the things we have created, even this sponsor kind of mentality, is create an impression of easy access to money, soft life.
Yeah.
You know, and glorify literally bad behavior that a good number of college girls, for instance, right now, they would not mind, you know, having even 3 sponsors. People they absolutely do not know. And when you're a foreigner, it's even better because they associate foreigners with money, you see. And we're building a culture and glorifying a culture to the extent where you have now leading socialites who, unfortunately, some of them are hanging out with even very prominent Kenyans in government and in the opposition, okay, whose business is actually wrong. Some of them have been drug trafficking, some of them literally sell their bodies for a living and everything else, and because they have succeeded, you see, that when we present that image as the normal one, the message we're sending to our young girls is, you know what, you don't really have to work hard. You don't have to earn a living through the right means. You can simply make a quick buck by doing ABC and D, because most girls who were properly raised, is going to be very hard for them to meet up with a stranger and just disappear with them. You see. 2, those ones who are sensitized on the dangers of hanging out with strangers are also going to be very reluctant. They're going to ask a lot of questions. But a lot of it, because it's driven by the desire to make money quickly so they can live either the lifestyle of their friends or perhaps not to go back to the village, you see, is pushing our girls. This is just one of the few stories. A lot of our girls out here being raped. Some of them are gang raped, and these things are not reported. Some of them have been trafficked and they've disappeared from the country, and we don't know about that. So this is actually just a tiny case of a pandemic that we're facing. I mentioned on this program last year that a recent study by ISS and others revealed that Kenya is number 4 on the continent in human trafficking, in transnational organized crime. And part of that organized crime is actually human trafficking, you know, apart from other things that we're doing. These are statistics, you see. That means we need to look at ourselves as a country, you know, try to find out what exactly is going wrong. Why are we even becoming a transit nation, you know, as well as a source nation for these things? How have we allowed this? Yes, granted, we are a lot more open country than some of our neighbors, you know, and that makes us vulnerable. But what framework are we putting in place to make sure that these things do not happen? I can guarantee you the way that this gentleman did that, I don't think it's the first time he has done it. He's probably done that several times.
Yeah, according to the cops, what he did was with precision and expertise.
Yes, exactly.
He suspect he's been in the business.
Yeah, so I think we need to reevaluate how we're approaching the entire issue of organized crime, of trafficking, as well as other cultural and social issues that we're facing as a country that we're not addressing. And the idea of glorifying soft life at any cost, I think is something we need to reevaluate as public intellectuals, as leaders, and as media.
Right, just the glorification of it, that we have even the moniker that is changing from prostitution to socialism, or socialite, so to speak. And we can see, even as you say, hanging out with the very prominent people in government, even some of them actually, they're in government. If you look at some of the arms of government, they are there. It will appear to someone else that, you know, that can be an easy life, that if I glorify myself, if I'm posting, you know, pictures on social media, at the end of the day, I can actually even get a seat or don't be nominated in parliament at the end of the day. Are we, because I've seen also there's a legislation that I think is coming to the floor of the House, or a bill where we want to institutionalize the commercial sex workers, so that now they will, in the formal sector, also them, they will be recognized as part of the taxpayers at the end of the day. I don't know if you're privy to that particular bill, and I was looking at this, was saying, okay, where are we headed as a country? Are we glorifying moral decadence? Even if we hack back into history, everyone has been raising eyebrows on prostitution, but we're not using the word prostitution anymore, but we're using socialites. You know, they'll twerk, they will do all manner of things they want to do, they'll change their skin color just to get acceptance, and, you know, people will also accept them and embrace them in social media. So they become part of our society, and everyone has said, okay, this has been there, this is a lifestyle, deal with this.
You see, Dibal, let me start with what you have just said. I've always told you that we are an embodiment of what our history is. Anybody who has read the book by Louisa White, Comforts of Home, the history of prostitution in Nairobi, you know very clearly whether you registrate it or not, it is still very rampant. It is a very good commercial activity that has been part of our history. If you have a chance, please read that book, Comforts of Home.
Comforts of Home.
Yeah, History of Prostitution in Nairobi by the historian Louisa White. You will get a lot of things. But let me weigh in to what my colleagues are talking about. Mheshimiwa Hassan talks about mental problems as an explanation of what we are seeing. Professor Kawanja sees it as a commercial venture involving harvesting human organs, especially of young people. I don't know whether the one of young people is more variable than the old dudes like us.
Yes, indeed.
Hassan sees it more as a structural societal problem. We just reduced, the vulnerable social aggregates into a state of want, where anything that gives money goes. Let me come from a perspective of having spent part of my life in hospitality education. I know that Airbnb is a new concept in hospitality that is challenging the dominance of the conventional hotels the way we know it. And in the country, it has come with a number of advantages, really, when you compare it to conventional hotels. In terms of affordability, that is one. Two, it gives the requisite privacy, particularly for those of you in public, devalue included. You can check into a facility without much hullabaloo, and you have your rest and enjoy yourself without being disturbed. So it comes with that kind of advantage. But it appears to me that a very good concept in hospitality has been penetrated by criminals. And for me, those are the people we need to deal with. The government is, characteristic of what government response is, a knee-jerk reaction. But I see three ways we can sort out this. One, I think unknown to many in the public, there is a government institution that registers and oversees all hospitality institutions. It's called TRA. Tourism Regulatory Authority. What they need is to strengthen that institution so that all these hospitality institutions are duly registered, known how they operate, and known whether they put all the requisite security measures in place. This is something that we can do in the long term by strengthening the functions and operations of the Tourism Regulatory Authority. I know that over the years they have been having challenges with finances to enable them do what they are supposed to do. The government needs to put enough money in TRA to make sure that they do what the law says they need to do. That's number one. Number two, we as a society, and just like Mheshimiwa Hassan, I'm a father of a daughter, and I'm increasingly getting worried, how we are treating our daughters, our sisters, and our mothers in this society. We need to begin at different levels in various institutions to re-socialize our young people, both male and female. To re-socialize them in ways that they are able to make fruitful friendship, to make fruitful relationships, and to avoid the situation where we have overemphasized the commercialism aspects of friendship. If I have lots of money and I can flash it around, every beautiful girl in town will fall for me. We need to educate our young people, both boys and girls, that money is really not everything. The things we are seeing is actually an indictment to our society and our morality as a people. And I will ask, where are our churches? Where are our mosques? Where are our temples when our young children are actually, demonstrating morals that are much removed from what we preach in our temples, in our churches, and in our mosques? That's a challenge to us, and we are not going to run away with it. Our universities, we are producing people who are only book smart, but we need people who are also socially smart, so that they are able to see danger when one is coming. And of course, finally, our police service needs to be able to do investigation in a case like this one and deal with it in such a way that any potential criminal will learn a lesson that that is not the direction I need to go. Any shoddy job from the part of the police will actually give a boost to criminals to continue with this. So we expect that the police will deal with with these cases that we have had, 2 or 3 very heinous cases that we have had of killing of young women, in such a way that anybody who thinks of doing it again will think twice, because the measures against them will be stern, will be severe in ways that will enable them to be deterrent to any potential cases.
I think we've been here before. We had Onyancha, yes, who was also they're out there, or
the vampire.
Yeah, the vampires.
Yes.
So we've not accrued any lessons from the Onyanchas of this world as well. We want to take a short break. I don't know if you've got any sentiment on that, Peter Kogwanja, before we take a short break, and we look at what is on the headlines as well. The neighbors.
I just want to highlight that what we are discussing here, we are used to it. We are used to serial killers and all. That's normal, and that has been said. I think what we need to educate, particularly our law enforcement branches, is that we are not dealing with a case as usual, because we're dealing with prosperous African countries. Egypt is now the leading in organ trafficking. We've been talking about human trafficking. We have gone a notch higher. We are now in organ trafficking, particularly with the increase of diabetes in the West. On a daily basis in Cairo, they are supposed to be transplanting 500 cases of kidney transplant. And the countries have banned issues of donating an organ to a person for religious reasons and so on. I'm giving the case of Egypt, which is very next to Kenya in terms of prosperity. After Kenya, you go to South Africa, and after South Africa, you go to Nigeria. These are called regional powers. They are also economic powers. And this is where prosperity is beginning to produce a certain genre of crimes that our law enforcement may not have been trained on. So we've moved from human trafficking to now organ trafficking. And organ trafficking sometimes requires elimination of the person, because you cannot get the liver and still get the person alive. But with the kidney, you can. So you are seeing people in Sinai Peninsula walking with one kidney because the other one was harvested by force or coercion or induction. So that is an area we need to go and study in Egypt and find out whether this is what is replicating itself or being replicated in Kenya. Related to this organ trafficking is what we call tourism. The proliferation of tourism, the growth of tourism, which we are placing, is essentially enabling organ harvesters to enter into countries. And this is a very new area that we need to begin looking at, whether our tourism can also be a conduit of this, because organ harvesters are not criminals the way you know them. They come as tourists, they are wealthy. The third aspect, which Dr. Khanyenje talked about, is the lure of soft life. And what is happening? Quick example. A neighbor, a girl neighboring somewhere I know, got a good Nigerian boyfriend. And the boyfriend was benevolent, built a good house for the parents who are not very well, and started educating poor brothers. These are a few dollars. Then they relocated from Nairobi to Dubai. And they were living on what you can call it a soft lane, the soft lane of life. Until the girl's passport disappeared. And when she started looking for it and asking for it, she found, after pushing and doing, Kenyan girls sometimes are clever, and went and found her passport and their marriage certificate, because they had a marriage certificate together, and a third certificate, which was a death certificate, and she was supposed to be dying on a week after this. All these are together, her passport, marriage certificate, and her death certificate. That was for drug trafficking, because these kind of, if you've read novels like James Sandwich's, the Coffin from Hong Kong and others, you know what we're talking about. So these are not things out of this world, they are real. Because this Kenyan girl was supposed to be brought home and married, and as she's coming home, then she'll be carrying drugs in her body, because who insists on opening somebody's, it's very easy way to do this. Kenyan girls should be very, very careful. I'm also a father of daughters, very many. He's also another of mine, I know several, mine are many. So when you say that this is a danger, it is. Appeal is to our law enforcement agencies. This is not business as usual. It is not mental cases and mental criminals. There might be cases of mental criminals, but largely we have entered a new terrain of criminality, from human trafficking to organ trafficking by very wealthy, rich, super rich kind of people who can buy the law, who can pay for their crime, and who can escape without leaving behind any traces. That's where we are.
Right, so I'm interested to know, did the girl escape that dragnet?
Yes,
after she got that revelation?
She did.
She did?
She jumped in the plane and came back to Kenya. That's how the story is known. If she died, you don't have to be telling the story. What's your problem?
All right, we'll take a short break right now. When we circle back, we look at what is happening in the region right now, especially in the dailies. Kenya's trouble with the neighbors. We've been lately, of course, in the headlines of the citizen in Tanzania, in Uganda as well. What does it portend for our foreign relations, especially with the current regime? Are we losing that good posture that we've had as a leading, of course, figure in East Africa? We'll take a short break. We'll circle back with more.